Hello out there.
Hello up there.
You guys are all like spread out all over the room. I feel really self-conscious about this. You could all move closer, really. You don't have to, but it's silly. But whatever you want to do. I'm Keith R. DeCandido. I am an author guest of honor here at Zenkaikon. Thank you all for coming. I know there's only like half a dozen of you, but that's frankly a half dozen more than I expected to show up, so that's good. I will be reading from the recently released anthology, Thrilling Adventure Yarns 2022. This is a latest in a series that started with Thrilling Adventure Yarns back in, I think, 2019. And there have been two since. There was also Thrilling Adventure Yarns 2021, which I don't have with me because I don't have a story in it, so I care about it less. But I do have, I have a story in this one which was called Alien Invasion of Earth. I think you can imagine what the plot was of that one. It was basically a 1950s alien invasion storyline. And then for 2022, I wrote the story you were about to hear, which is called, it is a two-fisted pulp story called Ticonderoga Beck and the Stalwart Squad. All the stories in the Thrilling Adventure Yarns anthologies are new stories, written at the time that we published them for the most part, but are done in an old-fashioned pulp style, and several different categories. In this one, we've got mysteries, westerns, two-fisted stories like mine. We have an aviation story, occult, science fiction, sword and sorcery, you name it. Each one comes with an illustration, and it's even like laid out like an old magazine with the two columns, and with the lurid cover. I love these anthologies so much. Anyway, this is Ticonderoga Beck and the Stalwart Squad. Transcript of Movie Tone News segment, July 7th, 1938. Dun 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 dun. Just in time for the 4th of July, Ticonderoga Beck and his stalwart squad put the kibosh on a spy ring that had been selling secrets to America's enemies. Uncle Sam could celebrate his birthday in peace, knowing that Beck was on the case and keeping the US of A safe. Beck was also responsible for saving the people of California from a poisoned water supply, courtesy of the notorious gangster and former bootlegger, Cool Hand McCool. Thanks to Beck, McCool got an all-expenses-paid trip up the river. We caught up with Beck at the Prunella Man Institute, his headquarters in New Paltz, New York, where the first thing he does is show his great modesty. I couldn't do any of what we do without my stalwart squad. We're a team, after all. Beck shows us the state-of-the-art laboratory where he develops all the tools of the trade he uses to fight for freedom. I named this institute after my grandmother, Prunella Mann. She was a great lady, and she helped raise me right after my parents passed, even though we were dirt poor in the Bronx. And this lab is the heart and soul of the place. A lot of my inventions have been created here. A self-made man and autodidact, Beck has taught himself all the skills he puts to use in his ongoing crusade to keep America safe. Beck makes sure we get to talk to the members of his stalwart squad as well. Everyone knows his bodyguard, former heavyweight champion Sluggin Secundo Vecchia, who retired after his famous TKO against Max Schmeling in 1932. Here we see Sluggin Secundo in Beck's state-of-the-art gymnasium. It's a great, how you say, privilege to be guarding the body of Ticonderoga Beck. Magnifico. Less famous is his physician, Shaolin. Though Beck has said many times that he saved his life more than once with his strange oriental voodoo. Honor it is to be serving such a man as Ticonderoga Beck. Forgive me, my English is not great. Rounding out the stalwart squad is Beck's chauffeur, pilot, and mechanic, Gregory Johnson, here giving a tune-up to Beck's famous aeroplane, Monty's Honor. Mr. Beck, he the best. I sure enough love working for him. My sister, she do too, and I love flying the planes and driving the cars and fixing them up for Mr. Beck. Lest we forget the fairer sex, Beck also has two great gals pitching in to help out. Gregory's sister Mary is the cook here at the Institute, and her mouth-watering meals are the bee's knees. And then there's Beck's lovely secretary, the beautiful Della Mays, who keeps Beck from forgetting his appointments. But it all comes down to Ticonderoga Beck himself, who we see here talking to a group of school children in his old stomping grounds of New York City. Remember, pals, Ticonderoga's 3 big L's. What are they? Look, listen, learn. Exactly. Remember those 3 things, and you'll always be the best. And there goes Monty's Honor, flying off into the night, ready for Ticonderoga Beck's next adventure. Dun, 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 dun. Prunella Mann Institute, New Paltz, New York, July 5th, 1938. Ticonderoga Beck watched as the truck from Movietone News drove down the long and winding road that led away from his redoubt on Mohawk Mountain in New Paltz, New York. Secundo Vecchia and Chow Lin stood on either side of him. The former boxer, at 6'6", towered over the others. Secundo was the only person who ever made Beck, who was 6'2", feel short. Both men wore tailored suits for their appearance on the newsreel. Secundo's a tan one, while Beck's was navy blue. Meanwhile, Chow Lin, who stood at only 5'9", wore a red and gold patterned Chinese tang suit with a matching hat. All 3 wore pins with the stylized B logo that also was emblazoned on the front door, the sides of all their vehicles, their stationery, and anything else they could label. Secundo said, in perfect English with only a minor trace of an accent, "A very good job, Tai. Very good." Chow Lin spoke with no trace of an accent when he said, "It was not necessary for you to insist that we be interviewed as well." "Yeah, it was, pal." Beck threw up his hands. "You guys are the stalwart squad, and the ones who actually do all the work. I wanted you to get some recognition. I just wish you 2 and Greg didn't have to talk like 3 illiterates." The trio turned and re-entered the Institute through the large double doors to the grand foyer. In front of them was the curved staircase that led up to the offices, living quarters, and laboratories, with a door to the left leading to the lounge, the door to the right leading to the kitchen and dining room, and another staircase under the big one that led downstairs to the hangar and garage. Della Mays was coming down the big stairs as they entered. The petite blonde wore a dark blue dress with a brooch that had the 3 interlocking L's, symbolizing Ticonderoga's 3 big L's, the mantra of look, listen, and learn. "You know it is what they expect, yes?" Secundo was saying. "If I speak too well, they don't think I'm me anymore." "And when they observe a Chinaman," Chow Lin added, "they do not anticipate an ability to speak the language as if you were a native." Della laughed as she got to the bottom of the stairs. "You don't sound like no native I ever met, Chow Lin." "And that's another thing," Beck said. "They wouldn't even talk to Della and Mary." "Course not," Della said. "They never cared what I thought back when I was handling Secundo's finances. They ain't gonna care now. Heck, they just figured Al did all his books, not the dumb blonde." "You are not a dumb blonde, pal," Beck said with a sigh. "To John Q. Public, all blondes are dumb, Tai." She shrugged. "I'm used to it. As long as the check's clear, I can give it to him." "Oh, speaking of that, the check came in from Republic for the latest movie serial. They're starting production next week. You need to endorse it so I can deposit it tomorrow when I go to the bank." Beck nodded. "Sure, right after I get out of the monkey suit." "Also, while you guys were gabbing with the Movietone jokers, we got 2 calls. Secundo Al called, says he needs to talk to you about getting new punching bags for the gym. And the feds called. They said Agent Koff would be coming by today around 4:30 or so." Secundo nodded. "I will return Alberto's call after I too have removed my monkey suit." The ex-boxer headed upstairs to use the telephone to talk to Alberto Randazza, who had been Secundo's manager throughout his boxing career. After Secundo retired, Randazzo opened a gymnasium in Manhattan, which he and Secundo managed together. Mostly because Randazzo had no business sense. While everyone assumed that Randazzo had handled Secundo's money, as most managers did for boxers, it was Della who had managed the boxer's finances. She had been the one to invest in government bonds rather than standard stocks, which meant that Secundo was one of the few who didn't lose everything in October of 1929. It was also Secundo's money that enabled them to start the Stalwart Squad 4 years earlier. Mary Johnson came in from the kitchen then, an apron over her house dress. "I hear Della right? Kopf is coming back today?" Beck nodded. "Yeah, probably has another mission for us that the FBI just can't handle." "Good. I finally got the knockout gas he's been bugging us about working right, so you need to show it to him." Wincing, Beck said, "Oh God, can't you do it? Every time I show off one of your gases or potions, I expect it to blow up in my face." "No, I can't do it. I'm the damn cook, remember? But speaking of that, it's pork chops tonight." Beck felt his mouth water. Mary Johnson was a brilliant biochemist, graduating at the top of her class at Columbia University. But, because she was a colored woman, no one in the sciences would give her the time of day. Her brother faced the same problem after he acquired his degree in mechanical engineering from Cornell University. Because they couldn't get the patent office to take their work seriously, Beck had registered their creations as his own, and the money from the patents continued to fund the Stalwart Squad's work. It meant that, as far as the world was concerned, Mary was just the cook. However, she was a fabulous cook, and her pork chops were particularly magnificent, stuffed as they were with breadcrumbs and herbs. Chow Lin had already departed the foyer, as usual, without anyone noticing, and Mary went back into the kitchen. Beck followed Della upstairs. Her office wall was covered with framed newspaper pages of the Stalwart Squad's various exploits, or, rather, according to the headlines, Ticonderoga Beck's exploits. Rarely was the squad given any credit, which continued to stick in Beck's craw. His eyes fell on one of the newspaper articles that didn't mention him by name, but it was probably the most important, because it's what got the squad started. It was the September 9th, 1934 edition of the New York Herald Tribune story about the arrest of Joseph Snyder Jr. in the Bronx. Sorry, reading is thirsty work. Monty's Soda Shop, Bronx, New York, August 7th, 1934. It is good to be within these walls once again, Chow Lin said as he entered the soda shop on Grand Concourse in the Bronx for the first time since he was a teenager. Beck smiled as the Chinaman came to join him, Greg, and Mary at their favorite table. He was wearing black just like the rest of them had for the funeral, and in his case a simple suit. As he sat, Chow Lin said, "I am pleased to see you all again." "Same here," Mary said, putting a hand on Chow Lin's. "Uncle Monty always liked you." "Your uncle was the only shop owner who treated my family and I with respect and kindness." "He treated everyone with respect and kindness," Beck said. "That's why we always came here." Greg smirked. "Well, Mary and me came here because he was always giving us free sodas because we was family." Mary smacked her brother gently on the arm. "You stop talking foolishness, Greg." Beck chuckled. "I can't believe Secundo actually came to the funeral. Wouldn't it be great if he came by the shop, too?" Snorting, Greg said, "No way slugging Secundo has time for us little people no more." From the door, a familiar deep voice said, "But Gregory, my friend, everyone is little people to me." Turning, Beck saw that Secundo was coming into the shop, Della at his side, though her 5-foot frame was barely noticeable next to the behemoth that was the former heavyweight boxing champion. The pair joined them at the table. "What's going to happen to this place?" Della asked. Mary sighed. "Our worthless cousin inherits it, but she don't want it. Says she don't know nothing about running no soda shop, so she's selling it." "A pity," Chow Lin said. "This shop is a beacon of hope in the neighborhood. One of the few in these dark times." "Well, it must have been pretty bad," Della said, "if Monty went and hung himself." Greg and Mary both winced. At the funeral, everyone had been avoiding talking about the manner of Monty Johnson's death. But Della's indiscreet utterance proved to be the perfect entree for what Beck wanted to say. "Listen, I know the coppers said that it was suicide, but I don't think I buy it." "What you mean, Ty?" Greg asked. Beck took a breath. "Look, I know I ain't the smartest guy on the block, but you guys haven't been here. Secundo's had his boxing career with Della helping him. Greg and Mary went off to college. Chow Lin moved to California. But I stuck around. I've seen lots of people bugging Monty. More and more every year. Especially Slimy Snyder and his dad." They all exchanged looks. Joseph Snyder III was the neighborhood bully. And he never hesitated to harass them when they were all kids coming into the soda shop. And his father was a prominent businessman who had been good friends with Mayor Walker and was still good friends with Governor Lehman. "I think that Slimy Snyder's dad killed Monty, but I can't prove it, and the cops won't bother to investigate because they think it's a suicide. But you guys are the smartest people I've ever met. Maybe you can prove it." Prunella Mann Institute, New Paltz, New York, July 5th, 1938. They had all agreed to help find out who killed Greg and Mary's uncle. And 3 weeks later, Joseph Snyder Jr. was arrested for multiple murders. It turned out that Monty was one of several colored people Snyder had lynched over the years. Secundo had been the one to connect all the events. Chow Lin had interrogated some of Snyder's associates, and Greg and Mary were able to uncover some physical evidence in the apartment over the shop that proved that Monty hadn't hung himself. But when it came time to present the evidence to NYPD Commissioner O'Ryan, it was decided that it should be Beck, a 6'2", brown-haired, brown-eyed Caucasian, who did so, rather than a Chink, a Dago, a Pollock, and two coloreds. Greg and Mary had been stifled in their attempts to pursue careers in mechanical engineering and biochemistry. Since he was a child, speaking very broken English after emigrating to the US, everyone had assumed that Secundo was a big, dumb lout. Chow Lin's opportunities were limited by his race, and as for Della, everyone had assumed her to be Secundo's girlfriend, and there was no avoiding the consequences of that assumption. As members of the stalwart squad, though, they could do what they did best, with everyone believing that Beck was the leader and the brains and the inventor. Beck loved that they did so much good. He just wished the others could get proper credit for it. He endorsed the check from Republic, looked over the artwork that had been couriered over from the Eisner-Eiger studio for the Ticonderoga Beck comic magazine, and tried his best to follow Mary's demonstration of how to work the knockout gas so he could show it off to Agent Kopf. Which was good, as the Fed himself arrived right on time at 4:30, driving up the long, winding road in his Ford V8 sedan. Beck met him out front and shook the agent's hand as he exited the vehicle. "Good to see you, pal." "You too, Ty." Kopf returned the handshake vigorously. The pair entered the double doors emblazoned with a stylized B. Kopf wore a simple gray suit while Beck had changed into a turtleneck, slacks, and boots. "So I've got some good news for your boys in the scientific crime detection lab. I finally got a handle on that knockout gas." That's great, Ty," Kopf said quickly. "Hey, what's with the long face there, pal? You've been after me to get you this gas for months. Didn't you tell me your boss only lets us do what we do because I give him such great toys to play with?" "Yeah, but right now, Director Hoover wants to string you up." Beck led Kopf into the lounge. He pulled a pack of Chesterfields out of his back pocket. "Cigarette?" "Thanks," Kopf said. After pulling two out of the pack, he put them both in his mouth and walked over to the drinks cabinet, where there was a book of matches. He lit both cigarettes and handed one to Kopf. The Fed took a seat on the couch. As the Fed took a seat on the couch, Beck asked, "Drink?" "No, thanks." "Well, I think I'm going to need one if I've cheesed Hoover off." While Beck yanked the cork out of a bottle of scotch, Kopf said, "There's a problem with the radio show. The last 5 broadcasts, there were reports of people going crazy and getting violent when they were listening to it. Took a while to put the pattern together, but there have been 24 incidents, all taking place in homes with radios between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m. on Monday nights. Chesterfield is talking about pulling their sponsorship." Beck threw back a slug of the scotch he'd just poured before asking, "Why is this the first I'm hearing of all this?" Kopf shrugged and took a puff on his cigarette. "Damned if I know, but you may need to buy a new brand of cigarettes." Chuckling, Beck said, "Buy? They give me a box a week for free, part of the sponsorship deal." Then his face grew serious. "We'll get into this." Holding up a hand, Kopf said, No, I'm just here to fill you in as a courtesy. And for the record, it's a courtesy Director Hoover did not want me to extend, but I insisted. This is an active FBI case. I'm here to tell you not to stick your noses into it, okay, Ty?" "Well, I appreciate that, pal." Beck tried to sound almost sincere as he said that. Kopf smiled. "Good. Now show me this knockout gas." Prunella Mann Institute, New Paltz, New York, July 7th, 1938. Within half an hour of Kopf's departure from the Institute with a sample of the knockout gas, Della was on the phone with the Mutual Broadcasting System to request the master tapes of the last 5 episodes to air, as well as a list of everyone who was involved in the making of them. When Secundo had asked Della to do that, Beck had said, "Hang on, pal. Kopf told us to lay off. He was just informing us as a courtesy." "We have a responsibility," Secundo said. "This is your reputation, Ty. We cannot leave it in the hands of the government." 2 days later, the tapes arrived, shipped from WXYZ in Detroit, where the show was recorded. The stalwart squad gathered in the laboratory to listen to them. Greg put the tape into the machine and adjusted the dials on his own audio equipment to try to detect any anomalies in what came out of this tape machine's speakers. The rest of the squad just listened. After a brief bit of string music, the distinctive deep voice of actor Matthew Rex, which, it had to be said, sounded absolutely nothing like Beck's lighter tones, spoke the same words he spoke at the top of every episode. Remember, look, listen, and learn. Then the friendly voice of announcer J.T. Clarkson said, Chesterfield presents Ticonderoga Beck, fighter for freedom and defender of the downtrodden. Tonight, Beck faces the latest challenge, the Candy Killer. Greg was shaking his head while Clarkson was reading an ad for Chesterfield cigarettes. Who comes up with all this nonsense? Della chuckled. They got writers, same as all the other shows. Yeah, but what the hell's a Candy Killer? We would have to listen to it, too. Secundo started, but then started to trail off. Beck turned to face the former boxer. You all right, pal? But Secundo didn't answer. Instead, he lowered his head, covering his face with his hands. Walking over to him, Beck said, Hey, pal, come on, what's... Beck was unable to finish as Secundo hauled off and belted him. He didn't even see it coming. One moment he was reaching out to his childhood friend, and the next he was laying on the floor of the lab, looking up at the ceiling, the entire right side of his face hurting like hell. A scream filled the room, barely recognizable as being a guttural version of Secundo's usual pleasant tenor. Pulling himself up into a sitting position, Beck saw Secundo screaming and flailing. Greg, Mary, and Della were all moving away from him. Beck couldn't see Chow Lin. And then, out of nowhere, Chow Lin appeared behind Secundo and got him in an arm lock. Then he kicked the boxer in the leg, which caused Secundo to collapse to his knees. Only then was Chow Lin able to get the much taller Secundo into a chokehold. Within moments, the former heavyweight champion lay unconscious on the floor. Nice job, pal, Beck said to Chow Lin. What the fuck was that? Della asked. Greg had stopped the recording and was now rewinding the tape. Give me a minute. He put on a set of headphones and plugged the wire into the tape machine, then flipped several switches. He started to play the tape again, but the sound was only going to his ears. Having clambered to his feet, Beck rubbed his right cheek and asked, What do we do with him? Mary snorted, I ain't carrying him. Chow Lin said, He will be fine when he awakens, assuming that whatever caused him to go berserk is not still affecting him. Then he looked at Beck. Let me see your face. Beck lowered his hand and allowed the physician to examine the right side of his head. You will be well, Chow Lin said after a moment. There will be a bruise on your cheek, but I believe you shall be able to claim that you obtained it while pursuing malefactors. With a chuckle, Beck said, Wouldn't be the first time. Greg said, Yeah, okay. He removed his headphones and stopped the tape. That's what I was thinking when Ty told us about this nonsense 2 days ago. There's an undertone in the recording, something that might affect people with a really high range of hearing. Lord have mercy, Mary muttered. Someone figured it out? Greg nodded. Figured what out? Beck asked. Mary put her hands on her hips. She looked angry as hell. Back when I was at Columbia, some damn fool of a white boy tried to get me kicked out of the university because of color. He was doing some work with auditory stimulation like what Greg was just talking about, but he was having trouble making his notions work. If he kept at it... Chow Lin turned to Della. You obtained a list of those who worked on the dramatic presentation, yes? Della nodded and reached for her purse. She removed 2 sheets of paper that were folded over and held together with a clip and handed them to Mary. After looking up and down the list, she smiled. There he is, Paul Latsko. He's the audio engineer. Frowning, Della said, That ain't right. Audio engineer's Carl Ricker, or at least it was. Perhaps he is new to the job, Chow Lin said. I believe we should track down the address of this Paul Latsko and have words with him. Apartment of Paul Latsko, Detroit, Michigan, July 9th, 1938. It took Della a day to obtain the address of Paul Latsko and another day to file a flight plan for Monty's honor to fly from the private airfield behind the Institute to Detroit City Airport, where they had rented a berth in one of the hangars. However, when they arrived at the apartment building on Woodward Avenue near Merchants Row, they found a police officer stationed at the front door. State your business, please, the officer said, a stern expression on his very pale face. Then he stared at Beck and his eyes widened. Wait, you're that fellow from the serials, Cuyahoga Bach. Smiling his most pleasant smile, Beck said, Ticonderoga Beck, but yes. Reaching out to shake Beck's hand, the officer said, "Oh, it's a great pleasure to be making your acquaintance, Mr. Beck, sir. I'm Officer Sean McHenry, Detroit Police Department. At your service, sir." Returning the handshake, Beck said, "Thank you very much, Officer McHenry." Looking at the others, McHenry said, "Oh, and these lads and lasses must be your standard squad." "Stalwart squad," Beck gently corrected. I think you can help us, pal. We need to see Paul Latsko." McHenry's face fell. "Oh, sir, that might be a bit of a problem, as Mr. Latsko has recently passed from this earth, you see." Beck looked at Secundo, who exchanged a concerned glance with Shaolin. "What happened to him?" Beck asked. "Committed suicide, he did, sir, and quite grisly it was. I'm afraid that's why I'm stationed here, sir. The suicide only happened a few hours ago, and the coroner hasn't been by to fetch the body." Beck leaned in and spoke in a conspiratorial whisper. "I don't suppose we could get a look at the victim's apartment, could we?" "Well," McHenry said slowly, obviously considering his options, scratching his chin. "If 'twere anyone else, I'd say no as a matter of course, but seeing as how it's yourself, Mr. Beck, sir, I would have to say, have at it. 'Tis apartment number 4, and the door's open, seeing as how the lock was broken when we went in this morning." "Thank you very much, pal. We really appreciate it." As everyone moved toward the front door, the officer suddenly said, "Oh, wait, sir. I'm sorry, but we can't be having all of you going up. Just Mr. Beck." Thinking quickly, Beck said, "I can't go anywhere without my bodyguard, and I need Shaolin to accompany me as well." Again, he leaned in close. "He's an Oriental. He has abilities far beyond what us Easterners can manage." Eyes wide, McHenry said, "Oh, sure, and I've heard that about these chinks. All right then, but the coons and the girl need to stay behind." "They'll be fine, Mr. Beck," Greg said in his public voice. "We'll just be waiting down here for you." He was also visibly holding Mary back as he said it. His sister obviously wanted to go in. She was the one who had a run-in with Latsko back in college, after all, but it wouldn't do to antagonize the officer. With a nod to Greg, Mary, and Della, Beck went in, followed by Secundo and Shaolin. Beck was winded by the time he made it up the 4 flights of stairs, but both his companions were perfectly fine. Staring at the front door with its smashed lock, which was slightly ajar, Secundo said, "I see the police were as subtle as ever." By the time Beck got his breath back and went inside, Secundo and Shaolin were already inspecting the small apartment. A body that was intact from the neck down sat in an easy chair. The head was covered in blood, particularly in the neck and chin. A shotgun lay on the side of the chair. The chair itself was also covered in blood. Shaolin was looking over the body while the Secundo was looking around the rest of the large living room area. "This man did not commit suicide," Shaolin said. "That was fast," Beck said with a small smile. "Just so I know what to tell people, how do you know?" "There is a smell on his breath that matches that of an exotic poison that only comes from a plant that grows in the Rocky Mountain region." Beck knew better than to even question Shaolin, as he was one of the world's foremost experts on poisons. Instead, he said, "Rocky Mountains doesn't exactly narrow it down." "This does." Secundo was holding up a ripped-open envelope that he had removed from a garbage can. "A package for Senor Latsko from a post office box in Calgary." He handed it to Shaolin. "I am receiving a smell from this package that is not what I would expect from garbage." Shaolin took the package and took a sniff. "It is the same smell that is on the victim's breath." Secundo looked at Beck. "It would seem our next destination must be Calgary, which puts us well out of the jurisdiction of Agent Kopf and his colleagues." "Fine," Beck said with a sigh. "You were right, as usual, pal. Good thing we all have our passports." "We should return downstairs," Secundo said, "as I do not believe that Officer McHenry wishes to be proximate to our friends for much longer." "Good call, pal." The Fairmont Palliser Hotel, Calgary, Alberta, July 12th, 1938. A huge gaggle of press was waiting outside the Fairmont Palliser Hotel as Beck and the rest of the squad exited down the stairs that led from the revolving front door to the 9th Avenue sidewalk. Beck smiled as he approached the men and women of the Fourth Estate, who were all scribbling madly in their notebooks as he spoke. "What brings you to Canada, Ty?" "A secret mission, pal," Beck said. "One we're not really at liberty to discuss." "We heard you flew here from Detroit." Secundo had figured that the arrival of Monty's honor at the Rutledge hangar was what prompted the press to show up at the hotel. And if this reporter knew their flight plan, it all but confirmed that their arrival by air was what got this particular ball rolling. Aloud, all Beckwood said was, "Gotta refuel somewhere, don't we? Where are you off to now?" "Gonna take a little trip to the mountains in my new ornithopter." "Is this another one of your inventions, Si?" A very tiny part of Beck was tempted to give Greg the credit he deserved for building the ornithopter, as making an engine that would be able to flap the wings of the tiny aircraft was a tremendous accomplishment. But, leaving aside any other considerations, giving Greg that credit would jeopardize the patent, which was, of course, in Beck's name. So he simply replied, "You bet, pal. We're going to take it into the mountains for a spin." "What's in the mountains there, Ty?" With his widest smile, Beck said, "That's the secret mission, pal. You'll hear all about it once it's done, I promise you that. That's all I've got," he added quickly before another reporter could ask a question. "Remember, look, listen, learn." Della had summoned a cab while he was talking to the reporters, and the 6 of them piled into it and were taken to the Rutledge hangar. "Too bad the new airport ain't open yet," Greg said as the cab wended its way down 9th Avenue toward McLeod Trail. "Been itching to take a gander at how they're going to run it." Mary rolled her eyes. "Who gives a damn about some airport?" She looked at Della. "You sure it's Slimy Snyder?" Della nodded. "I couldn't get the post office to tell me whose P.O. box it was, so I went to public records. There's a huge house up in the mountains in Banff that's got that P.O. box as their mailing address, and it's owned by Swell Solutions, a corporation that's got a president and CEO named Joseph Snyder III. Chalin added, "The house in question is near a very large concentration of the poison plant that killed Paul Latsko." They sat in the cab in silence after that. Della had already told them all this in the hotel room, but Mary obviously hadn't entirely believed it. Neither did Beck. "I can't believe Slimy Snyder would do something like this. I mean, he was a creep, but still." "We put his father in jail," Secundo said. "And whoever it was who had Latsko use his auditory stimulation did so specifically with the Ticonderoga Beck show. I do not believe that is a coincidence, no? Both Snyder and Latsko had animus against the Stalwart Squad." "I wouldn't go that far about Latsko," Mary said. "I doubt that fool even remembers me. I was just some tar baby he didn't like, and I don't believe he cares enough to even notice Ty's cook, much less realize it's the same girl." Nodding, Secundo said, "Perhaps. But we do know that Senior Snyder III did not like us, even before we put his father in jail. I think we are being targeted, in which case the wisest course is for us to target him in return." The Snyder Mountain Estate, Banff, Alberta, July 12th, 1938. Hang on a second. Just want to double check something. Okay. Beck stumbled out of the ornithopter and tried very hard not to throw up. Greg flew the ornithopter beautifully through the mountains, dealing with all the updrafts, wind shifts, and such as they increased their altitude. But it was a very turbulent ride, and Beck's stomach was doing the Charleston. They had made a very soft landing on the rear end of the plateau, behind the large house that was owned by Swell Solutions. But that was the softest part of the entire trip, and Beck was extremely grateful to be back on solid ground. The others all exited the ornithopter a bit more gracefully. Beck straightened and took a good look at the house that apparently held their childhood nemesis. It was a Victorian with a large balcony on the second floor and a turret in the front. "There is movement in the house," Chalin said without preamble. Secundo frowned. "Then our foe, he knows we are here." He gave Chalin a look, and the latter nodded and moved away. Though the verb "to move" was inadequate, one moment Chalin was standing there, the next he wasn't. "We don't know that he knows we're here," Greg said. "My bird is quiet." "Maybe," Mary said, "but it ain't like a flying ship lands in your backyard every morning, especially up here in the middle of damn nowhere, no matter how quiet." "Don't move!" a voice bellowed from above. Beck looked up and saw 4 men holding Thompson machine guns. They all had blonde or light brown hair, cut short, and clothes like military men. Secundo whispered, "Plan G." After giving an infinitesimal nod, Beck threw up his hands. "We're not moving. Not resisting at all, please. Don't shoot. I just want to talk to your boss." One of the gun wielders, who had a pencil-thin mustache, smiled and said, "Oh, he wants to talk to you too, eh?" 3 more men came around from the front of the house, also holding Thompsons. "Ian, you go ahead and take Beck to see Mr. Snyder. Put the rest of them in the wine cellar." As Ian and his 2 colleagues moved closer, Secundo interpolated himself between them and Beck. "Hey, where Senor Beck go, I go, huh?" "Back off, Dago," Ian said, holding up his gun. Beck was starting to think that Plan G was going to be a bust, but then the one with the mustache said, "Fine, bring the wop along too. Put the girls and the Negro downstairs." As Ian said, "Come on," Beck thought that Plan D would have been okay, but he preferred to have Secundo with him in these circumstances. Both Beck and Secundo gave encouraging looks to Greg, Mary, and Della. Beck's look was more for the benefit of Ian and the other mercenaries, while Secundo's was the one that actually reassured them. The one with the mustache next to them met them inside the front door, which was a narrow foyer that led to an even narrower hallway. Ian took Della, Greg, and Mary downstairs. Secundo and Beck, meanwhile, were led further down the hall to what looked like a dining room. Several maps were laid out on the table, along with some blueprints. Standing at the head of it was the now grown-up form of the young man who tormented all of them during their mutual childhoods. His blonde hair, which had been curly when they were kids, was now slicked back, and he had a mustache in a similar style to that of his apparent chief of security. The blue eyes bore into Beck as he and Secundo entered. "Wow, wow, wow. If it ain't tied up in knots, Beck and his dopey Dago sidekick. About time you showed up, Ty. I was starting to think I'd have to write an engraved invitation." Beck regarded Snyder with annoyance. "You wanted me here, pal?" "I ain't your pal, Ty. And yeah, I wanted you here. Look, I could have used any radio show to test the Mind Ripper, but I used yours on purpose. See, I'm still kind of browned off about what you did to Dad." "Your dad killed Monty, pal. Sorry, Joe. Or should I just go back to calling you Slimy Snyder?" "Doesn't matter what you call me, Ty." Snyder walked around the table to confront Beck face to face. "Because what I'm going to call you is dead. You put Dad in jail. And for what? A colored soda shop owner? That place was a dump. The sodas were watery and everyone hated it. Well, except for you and your stupid friends like Slug and Secundo over there." Once Snyder got within a yard of Beck, Secundo stepped between them. "Not too close, eh?" He added several words in Italian that Beck didn't know. He'd been trying to learn the language with little success, though he did recognize the word bastardo. The mercenaries then immediately stepped in and tried to hit Secundo. However, the ex-boxer grabbed the mercenary's fist before it could collide with his stomach and started to squeeze. 3 other mercenaries then also attacked, one going after his head with the butt of his Thompson. Moments later, Secundo was slumped over the dining room table, while 3 of the 4 mercenaries were laying on the ground, moaning. Shaking his head, Snyder led Beck to the other side of the room, while more mercenaries came in to help the fallen ones. Secundo remained slumped on the table. "I never did get why you associate with these mongrels. Negroes, women, Chinks, Dagos. Do they make you feel more like a man or something?" "You wouldn't understand," Beck said truthfully. "Well, it doesn't matter. I got friends over in Europe who are really gonna love using this Mind Ripper. They're gonna pay me lots of money for it. I don't have to pay the fellow that invented it since the poor son of a bitch killed himself." "Nice try, pal, but I know you killed Latsko." "Oh, good luck proving that. Especially since you'll be dead as a doornail." "No, I doubt that, pal." Snyder laughed derisively. "Really? I could have had you shot when you landed that stupid wing thing behind my house, but I wanted to actually tell you that I was the one who brought you down. More fun for me. Sorry you won't live to see my clients take over Europe with the Mind Ripper." "Clients? That's right. Germany ain't gonna lose this war, pal. I'm gonna make sure of it. Too bad you ain't gonna live to see it." Snyder walked over to a bureau, opened a drawer, and pulled out a revolver. Just as he was pointing it at Beck's chest, his face started to scrunch up. "What's that smell?" Now Beck was starting to catch the odor as well. He almost answered Snyder's question with Plan G, but before he could even consider whether or not to reveal that, a meaty hand grabbed the revolver and the hand holding it. Secundo was standing next to Snyder, using his grip on Snyder's hand to push his entire body down into a kneeling position. "You have, confessed the crime to Senor Beck. Big mistake." Secundo grinned. "I've got 24 more soldiers in my employ, and they are quite unconscious," said Kane Chowlin's voice from the doorway to the dining room. Beck turned to see Chow-Lin with Greg and Mary behind him. He quickly said, "You should have searched my stalwart squad, pal. Then maybe you'd have seen the knockout gas pellets that I left with Mary. You also should have noticed that I was down one Chinaman." Sweat beading on his forehead, Secundo had yet to loosen his grip. Snyder said, "I just figured he went back to Tokyo or wherever." "Tokyo is in Japan. I was born in Shanghai," Chow-Lin said simply. Then he applied his hand to Snyder's neck, and a second later he fell unconscious. Only then did Secundo release his grip on the man's fist. "As I suspected," Secundo said, now back in his normal voice, "these blueprints are for a large-scale version of the Mind Ripper, and the maps that show the location in Europe that are being targeted: London, Paris, Madrid, Warsaw, and Amsterdam." Della showed up then, coming into the dining room behind Greg, Mary, and Chow-Lin, and removing a gas mask. "Found some carbons and some letters Slimy Snyder sent to our pal Latsko in Detroit, and some invoices for purchases made for some krauts overseas." Secundo smiled. Plus, he confessed his crimes to the famous Ticonderoga Beck. "Yes, he did." Beck blew out a breath. "Nice job, pals. I love Plan G." Prunella Mann Institute, New Paltz, New York, July 15th, 1938. Beck greeted Agent Kopf as he drove up the long road to the Institute in his Ford V8 and led him to the lounge for a drink and a cigarette. After taking a puff of his cigarette, Kopf said, "Director Hoover still wants to string you up." Beck finished pouring 2 drinks, then held out both hands, palms up. "You kidding me, pal? We handed him someone who was going to use the radio to make people kill each other. Oh, no, he's happy that Snyder's been caught and that Mind Ripper gadget of his is out of play. Joseph Snyder III has been on the most wanted list for a couple of years now, thanks to some stuff that happened in Montana back in '35. No, the director wants to string you up because you turned Snyder over to the Mounties." Shaking his head, Beck passed the glass to Kopf. "Of course we turned him over to the RCMP. We were in Canada. It's their jurisdiction. Besides, Snyder and his goon squad didn't fit in the ornithopter, so we needed the Mounties to take him into custody." Beck didn't add that every member of the contingent of RCMP officers who arrested Snyder and his goons wanted his autograph. "Did Hoover want us to violate international extradition treaties? Between you, me, and the lamppost? Absolutely he did. He hates dealing with the Canucks. On top of that, you guys were specifically instructed not to get involved in this case." Beck sighed. "So does this mean we're in trouble?" "Oh, goodness no, not directly. I mean, the director asked me to tell you never to go off half-cocked like that again, an instruction that I told him you were guaranteed to ignore, and then to thank you on behalf of the Bureau for capturing Snyder and for keeping the country safe." Holding up his glass, Beck said, "Tell him he's welcome. Did he like the knockout gas?" "You wouldn't say. He's got the boys in the lab going over it. My money's on them not being able to dope it out. They can never figure out your inventions, Ty. I guess I'm just that good." Kopf took a gulp of his drink, then grinned. "So how did you figure out it was him? It was Snyder?" With a knowing smirk, Beck said, "Plan G. I'm supposed to know what that is besides the one after Plan F?" "Oh no, it's the one after Plan E. I got rid of Plan F a long time ago." Kopf rolled his eyes as he puffed on his cigarette. "So what is Plan G?" "Let everyone except Chow-Lin get captured. He uses his oriental skills to stay out of sight while I get brought in to see the guy in charge and everyone else is imprisoned. Chow-Lin frees the others. They all use my knockout gas to take out the hired help while I get the guy in charge to confess." Beck gave the Fed a wide grin. "Works every time." Then his face fell. "Well, except that time in Brazil, but I substituted Plan Q and everything was fine." "That still doesn't tell me how you knew Snyder was the guy." "Oh, that was easy. I ran the tapes of the last batch of radio programs through my equipment here, and I doped out an auditory stimulation edition that they were playing with at Columbia University a few years back. The radio program had a new audio engineer who was part of that project at Columbia, but when we went to Detroit to talk to him, he was already dead. Suicide, the cop said, but I smelled a very distinctive poison on his breath that could only come from the Rocky Mountains. He had a package from Calgary that had the same smell, so we flew up there, tracked down the address to the package that came from Snyder's house in the mountains." Kopf shook his head and finished his drink. "You know, Ty, there are times when I think you're just making all this stuff up. Look, pal, the important part is that we stopped the plot to use mind control on the good people of the world, and we got our radio program back." Standing up, Kopf groaned. I bet the second part's more important, right, Ty? Honestly, I hate the show. The actor playing Secundo has a Spanish accent, not Italian, and they don't even include Greg, Mary, or Della. But you like the checks that come in, I assume. He handed Beck the empty glass. Well, I'm heading back to the New York office. Always a pleasure, Ty. You always have the best scotch. After the Fed departed, driving his V8 back down the long driveway, Beck saw that Secundo had joined him. There is no Plan Q, and Plan F is a perfectly viable plan. I was trying to make it sound like convincing, like you keep saying I should, pal. I suppose. And it is best that Agent Koff believes, as the others do, that you are the brilliant mind behind it all. They walked back to the kitchen. Beck could smell Mary's roast chicken as they grew closer. I don't think it's best at all that you guys don't get the credit. The plans are all yours, and it's Mary's knockout gas, and Greg built the ornithopter, and... He sighed. They entered the kitchen. Greg, Della, and Shaolin were already seated at the table in front of empty plates and filled wine glasses, while Mary was standing in the kitchen with a large fork and knife, carving the chicken into pieces. About time you were done with that, Fed, Mary said. Hoover liked the gas? Agent Kopp said he's withholding comment until his own lab boys go over it, but they probably won't be able to figure it out any more than they figured out any of your other inventions. Mary grinned. I guess I'm just that good. You all are. Beck grabbed the wine glass in front of his empty seat and held it up. To the stalwart squad, and another successful mission. While Mary came over to the table and grabbed her own drink, Greg added, to finally putting Slimy Snyder away, along with his racialist daddy. Hear, hear, Della said. They all clinked their glasses, and then all said in unison, look, listen, learn. And then they all drank. Now, Mary said, let's eat. And that's the story. Thank you guys for sticking through to the end. I see not everybody did, but that's okay. I've got these books for sale at my table. These are my last two copies of these two. Down on table number 14 in the dealer's room, right next to DeCandido and the lady with the hair sticks. And I've got other books for sale as well. You can get, if you don't get them from me, you can get the Thrilling Adventure Yarns anthologies from whatever your online book dealer of choice is. They're on Amazon and all the other places. I've got lots of other stuff coming out. The latest in my Precinct series of fantasy police procedurals was just released. It was called Phoenix Precinct. And I've got all of the books in that series downstairs. I'm working on a Resident Evil comic book that's coming out from Tokyo Pop. Issue 1 is already out. Issues 2 through 5 will be out over the course of the rest of this year. It's called Infinite Darkness: The Beginning. It is the prequel to the Netflix animated series Infinite Darkness that came out a couple of years ago, and focuses on the character of Leon. I've got a short story coming out in Star Trek Explorer magazine next month called You Can't Buy Fate. It's a Deep Space Nine story featuring Noggin as Redax. And I've got one, possibly two more stories coming out in Star Trek Explorer over the next few months as well. One definitely will be out this fall, I think. The title of the story is Work Worth Doing. And I've got a bunch of anthologies coming, two that I co-edited, one called The Four Somethings of the Apocalypse, which is alternate takes on the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. An anthology called Double Trouble, an anthology of two-fisted team-ups, which is a bunch of team-ups of classic characters that are written by a bunch of the best tie-in writers in the field. What else? Oh, I've got a Sherlock Holmes story coming out in July, part of an anthology called Cases by Candlelight that was put together by Christopher D. Abbott. Working on the sequel to A Furnace Sealed, my urban fantasy set in New York. It's called Feet of Clay. Another urban fantasy short story collection called Ragnarok in a Hard Place, More Tales of Cassie Zuko and Weird Miss Magnet, which also should be out later this year. I did a Star Trek monograph for the Gold Archive series about the Next Generation episode Birthright, and lots of other stuff too. And I'm still writing for Tor.com. Every week I have the Star Trek Enterprise rewatch. I'm in season 3 of that right now, and I've been reviewing the new episodes of all the new Star Trek shows as they come out. So I've been reviewing Picard season 3 and so on. And that's it. Again, thank you guys so much for coming. And if you want to talk more, you can find me down in the dealer's room. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, I had a bigger crowd when I started.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I had way too much fun with that story.